everybody. My name is Joni Khattar. I'm a Senior Product Manager here at Algolia. Our connector platform is all about democratizing data integration, making it accessible to users of all technical backgrounds. By simplifying the workflow, we aim to accelerate the adoption of Algolia's search and discovery features, enabling teams to focus on value creation rather than grappling with data integration complexities. I'm excited to announce today the following features which are now in beta. First off, our MySQL connector, the first to launch as part of our database connector series. Next up, Elasticsearch connector. Our goal here is to provide an incredibly straightforward way to transition and migrate to Algolia, allowing businesses to take advantage of Algolia's superior search capabilities with minimal effort. Lastly, the Google Analytics 4 event connector. This new connector is providing a low-code way to connect to a BigQuery table and export GA event data used to power Algolia features such as personalization and recommend. This is a slightly different mechanism to our Google Tag Manager connector that's been around for quite some time. So let me walk you through a quick demo of the MySQL data connector so you can see how it works. I think I just love to call out the fact that in order to get to the data hub, you just have to go down here on the left bottom side to data sources. I just want to call that out here. And I'll move my little bubble back. And then we're going to go to connectors. And here we are. We've got the data hub homepage here, and this is where all of our connectors live. So each of our connectors follow a very similar workflow. You start by connecting the source, creating the destination, and then setting up the task. Just want to mention a couple of prerequisites before we get started with the workflow. Of course, an active Algolia account, access to your MySQL database, and a level of familiarity with that MySQL database, the schema and authentication details. So the first thing we need to consider before we start to connect to the source is making sure that we've granted Algolia access to the MySQL database. So if I go into where my database is, which is in GCP, essentially what you're going to do is you're going to create or identify a MySQL user, and you're going to grant that access to it, or grant Algolia access. So I'm going to create a new source. And this is just from my GCP database that I've just showed you. So really you're just putting in the database connection credentials. One of the things to bear in mind here is by default, we tick SSL connection. So we do have different modes for SSL as well as SSH. So the default is the preferred, but we have other ways or other connection modes that you can read more about in our documentation. So I'm going to select preferred. The update method that we have available today is a full refresh. We are working on introducing incremental load, or otherwise known for us as change data capture. And so we will have the option to do those incremental updates shortly after we go live into GA at the end of July. So that is coming. We have here our SSH tunnel method. So again, for extra layer of security encryption, you can leverage that. And then I'm just going to give my source a name. So let's call it MySQL test 3. So as I go to create that source, you're going to see here us doing a connection. So there's a couple of new pieces that we've put into place within this database connector, and it's also throughout our other connectors as well. And that's the ability just to ensure that we have that connectivity and that connection to the database before we move on, as well as that feedback loop. So just being able to tell me like, great, you're connected to the database, all worked. And you can see here it said source successfully created. That just helps with me not having to go through the entire workflow and then realizing right at the end that, hang on, I've got a problem with my database connection. So before I move on to the destination section, I just want to call out this new area here, which is our transformation feature, part of the connector workflow. So this is something that's currently in pilot. I definitely encourage anybody that's interested in wanting to test out this feature and provide feedback to please get in touch. We'll provide details in our links here today on how to get in touch. But this is currently in pilot and will be available for public beta at the end of July. Essentially, this is allowing the user to write transformation functions in JavaScript as part of the data integration workflow here within the connectors. So I can do various different data prep, data formatting needs that I have. So for example, if I want to filter out some records, if I want to add or remove a property, if I want to change a data type, if I want to do any kind of grouping or bucketing of kind of values or attributes. So anything around basic sort of manipulations of the data in terms of like, those basic transformations and data prep use cases, you'll now be able to do within the workflow within Algolia. So really excited about this. More to come, but if you are interested in testing this out while it's in pilot, would love to hear from you. Moving on from that, we're just going to go into the creation of our destination. So I am going to, you can actually use an existing index if you want. In my case, I'm just going to create a new destination. So let's call it SQL test. And I'm going to auto create the credentials for the index here, nice and easy. And go ahead and create. So just moving into the final stage of the workflow for data integration here, which is configuring the task. Essentially, this is the frequency of updating your data, your records, putting in place a schedule. And so really here, I'm just going to fetch my data on demand just for the purposes of the demo. But of course, we can set a schedule and use various different cron expressions, or we have, some common ones here that have been pre-populated. So I'm just going to click on demand. I'm going to go with replacing my index completely. I've created a new index in this case. And for this part, we've got other obviously options here to partially update, append, or fully replace the index. In my case, I'm just going to go with replace. Down here, this is a little bit of a new workflow feature within the MySQL. It's also in the Elasticsearch connector as well, which is what tables do I want to sync. So I'm going to go ahead and select this table here. We will have, as part of GA, the ability to go into column level selection as well, which is pretty cool. And here we go. I'm just going to go into creating the task and getting the job to run. So I'm just going to run the job here. So as I let it run, essentially it's going to populate the index, but let's just come over here to the debugger. So the debugger is a great place. That's just where you're going to check your observability, if there's any failures, if there's any issues that have cropped up. So right now I can see that it's just currently, it's just loading my table into the index. But this is a great place to to see kind of, the error handling. So typically, you can see here I've been trying a few things out and I'm getting errors and transformations, but ultimately it's just going to give you that status, that outcome of how your jobs, how your tasks are running. So I can see here that there is the fetch and then obviously success messages coming in. So looking good so far. And I can go, the cool thing with the debugger is you can actually filter out for different error types or message types, statuses. So it's a pretty cool little tool here. You see I've got quite a few records coming in. This is looking good. So it's turned green. Green is go, success. We're all good here. Let me just show you where this is now landed in the destination. So here is my index. Great stuff. This is my index. Job done. And we're good to go. All right, so that was me. Would love to take any questions or even any feedback for the next sort of 5 minutes or so that we have.
Thank you. That was awesome, Joni. I really love how easy it seems to just pull data from one place and put it into Algolia, and being able to do all of that through the dashboard. That's awesome. We do have a few questions in the Q&A about if there is a MongoDB one that is coming up.
Yeah, so actually, as I mentioned, MySQL is sort of the first one of our database connector series. So we are planning to launch Postgres and Mongo. So we don't have specific ETAs on that now, but it's something that's definitely in the works, and it's sort of the next ones to come.
And you mentioned Elasticsearch as well. Can you give us some?
Yeah, so we have Elasticsearch out in beta today. So it's a very similar workflow. Obviously, you just have the connection to the endpoint and the source part, but you still have sort of the same workflow, table selection, connection, validation at the beginning, and that's available, yeah.
We also have a few questions about the impact on pricing and if it's available to any plan, and what's the impact of having several database connector on pricing?
Yeah, so all of the data connectors that you see with MySQL, Elasticsearch, JSON, they're all part of all the plans. So you can be on the free trials, the Grow, right up to the premium plans and take advantage. Really, at the end of the day, we're trying to reduce that friction of getting the data in so that you can be benefiting from, obviously, the search and discovery capabilities downstream. So we don't want to make that a barrier.
Yeah. And just to make sure I really understand how it works, it's really a one-way synchronization mechanism, the database being the source of truth, and Algolia becoming a copy of the data only for search, meaning that if I manually update a record on Algolia's side, it's not going to bubble up back to the database, right?
That's correct. And the reason for that, at least initially, I'm very open to get feedback from the audience, is that we kind of took the thought process that the shape of data and the data going into Algolia is very specific to Algolia and potentially what happens. And so not necessarily the need to sort of synchronize back. However, if we hear otherwise, we'd be happy to sort of look into it further and reconsider.
And following on that thought of the shape of the data needs to accommodate what would work for Algolia, I think you briefly mentioned the transformation or middleware to be able to transform data in between. How can you tell us a little bit more of how it would look like?
Yeah. So we're starting off, actually, as you saw, I didn't go into the specific demoing of it, and would love to at a later stage, but it will start as a code editor, actually. So it is sitting today in the connector workflow. We are planning to extend it out into, obviously, other data ingestion areas, such as API client, obviously, and even crawler, so that any data ingestion method can take advantage of the service. It is starting as a code editor, but there is helper functions. So we've developed a bunch of sort of, Algolia defined functions or sort of templates or packages, which can be sort of dropped into the code editor right off the bat to just get you going quickly. So that could be, grouping or bucketing or ranking or hierarchical category management. So it's kind of, again, there is that code editor to sort of like code as you please in JavaScript, but there's also that help to say, well, there's the functions and templates there to get you going faster.
Yeah, the kind of thing you do often when you need to transform data to fit into what Algolia is expecting. It's nice that it's embedded. Like this whole thing of moving data from a MySQL database to Algolia, it's not that hard per se, but it means you have to maintain it. It means you have to run the script. It means you have to do a lot of things. It's much better if it's taken care of, and we're giving you all the tools to really focus on how you want your data to look.
Exactly.
We do have a few more questions about more complex use cases, like, is it possible to populate multiple indices with only one database?
So right now, it's an interesting concept that it is being worked on, but in the context of actually what we're working through with Shopify. So that like one source to multiple destinations. So bringing that across into kind of all of our different workflows is something that we are looking at.
Okay. We have a question about if the connector is supporting TLS connection to MySQL Server. I think you said yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
And Algolia being flat JSON, how do you think we could transform a relational database into Algolia? I assume maybe on the MySQL side, we might need to create views to pull data from other database, or we might need to use the middleware to flatten everything before it goes to Algolia.
It's such a good point, Tim. I think this is some of the things that we're thinking about as we go into more of a GA release, is how do we want to consider looking out to multiple tables, maybe to pick up, maybe it's sort of a foreign key and I'm looking up a table, or I've got other kind of data sets sitting on other tables. And how do we want to manage that in conjunction with obviously our transformation capabilities? So it's something that is a limitation for beta, but it's something that we want to address because I think that's a pretty common use case.
Okay. We have more questions in the chat. Unfortunately, we won't have time to answer them all on screen. So Joni will answer your question directly in the Q&A in the chat, but for now, we'll have to move to our next speaker for the day. Thank you so much, Joni, for this presentation. That was really, really interesting.
Thanks for the opportunity.